Hey there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Food Experience. Today's experience, I'm making lasagna in the Kalorik Maxx air fryer oven. The sauce I'll be preparing on the stove top in addition to the meat, but overall, everything regarding the lasagna part will be made in the Kalorik Maxx air fryer oven. I have the grill version, but either version will work just fine. In fact, any countertop oven or even your regular oven will work fine with this recipe. And without further ado, there are some preparations. Let's go ahead and get it started. In a blender, add the stewed tomatoes, tomato paste, garlic, parsley, along with salt, pepper, and oregano. Put the top on and blend until it's smooth. Alright, there we go. In a large pan, add 6 tablespoons of olive oil. Turn on your stove to medium heat. Let the oil heat up first. Now that the oil's heated up, adding in some onions. And you want those to cook until they're like translucent. That ends up softening up the onions a bit. Next, add in the tomato sauce. And add in the white wine. And for tonight's wine, I am using Barefoot Chardonnay. Just use whatever cheap white wine you could find. It doesn't really matter. You can certainly put a lid on it, and I'm using one that has a hole to let out some of the steam. And you want to let it simmer for about a half hour. I'm also adding in a few shakes of basil. Forgot to mention that. The original recipe doesn't call for that. And by the way, the original recipe I got is from allrecipes.com. I will post a link for that in my description of this video. That way you could go there and see everything written down and give them credit where credit is due. Placing the top back on. I have a large skillet. You want to preheat that on medium-high for a few minutes. Also adding a little bit of olive oil to it. Now that the oil has had a chance to heat up, adding in ground beef, along with mild Italian sausage. As it's cooking, start breaking it up. I like using a wooden spoon. You're welcome to use whatever you have on hand. Also, don't forget to occasionally stir your sauce. And make sure to keep breaking up the meat. As it's cooking, it will be easier to break up. And you want to make sure the ground beef and sausage is blended in well with each other. Meanwhile, at the same time, I reduced the heat on the stove because it's boiling pretty furiously and I have it on low. So I figure with the lid off, it might not boil as hard. Meat is definitely looking done now. There are no more pink spots. It's pretty well ground up. And time to drain the fat from the meat. I'll do that off camera. Meanwhile, the sauce is still cooking. Looking pretty dang good. Smelling really good. And time to try a little bit, because sometimes you need to add in a little sugar to balance out the bitterness. I'll give this a try. The sauce actually tastes good as is, no adjustments needed. Taking it off the stove and time to build the lasagna. Time to preheat your max. Turning it on, oven, leave it on bake. Adjusting the time a lot higher than I need so I can prepare the lasagna, leaving it at 375 and starting it up. And you want to have the wire rack in the bake to position. I'm using Barilla oven ready lasagna. That way you do not need to boil it. First thing you want to do is coat the bottom of the pan with sauce. The lasagna will sit on top of this, and this is what helps soften the noodles up for oven baking instead of boiling. Adding in the bottom layer. And these are kind of touching each other or overlapping. There is nothing I could do about that due to the size of the pan I have. And then spoon some more sauce on top. I'm adding in some freshly grated mozzarella cheese, whole milk mozzarella, way better than the stuff you find in those plastic bags that's pre-shredded. That's always skim mozzarella and not nearly as tasty. Adding in some fresh Parmesan and some provolone cheese. I could not find fresh provolone, so I had to buy the pre-sliced stuff. That'll work. Adding in the sausage and ground beef mixture that I made. Followed by some more sauce. And a second layer of lasagna noodles. This layer, the second one, did not overlap. It's just smaller at the bottom of this pan. Adding in some more sauce. This time I'll add the meat first. Then mozzarella cheese, Parmesan cheese, along with provolone. Bit more sauce, and a top layer of lasagna noodles. Adding more sauce on top of that. And then a bunch of cheese. Mozzarella, Parmesan, and provolone. And if you notice, there is no ricotta cheese in my lasagna. I do not care for ricotta cheese, so I made a 3-cheese Italian blend, which works terrific. You could also add a little bit more meat on top. I wouldn't put too much, because it'll ruin the melted effect of all the cheese. But just a little on top, kind of like a garnish, should be fine. Next, wrap it with aluminum foil. And yes, you can use aluminum foil in the Maxx, folks. So long as it's on bake mode and the air fryer fan is not going, won't hurt a thing. Putting it into the Maxx. And you want that to bake for 25 minutes. Alright, lasagna is almost done. Time to remove. Starting it back up in air fry mode. Turning the heat down to 400 and let her rip. Take a look at the lasagna. Oh, that's looking pretty darn good. Adding a bit more provolone cheese to the top, and back into the Maxx it goes. As I mentioned, I'm in air fry mode at 400 degrees. It's almost done preheating, but that's not so important. Basically, waiting for the cheese to melt and get a little bit brown. And that looks like a wrap, folks. Oh, that looks good. That's what I'm looking at, folks. Looks so good. I need to let it rest for 15 minutes to kind of set up, and then it's time to dig in. The lasagna's been cooling off for 15 minutes. Should be good. It's no longer burning hot on the glass pan. That's a good sign. And I think there'll be 4 servings from this. There goes nothing. Ooh, look at that cheese though. Time for another serving. That looks great, guys. I will see you back at the table and sample it with you. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Here I am with the lasagna. Time to dig in. Smells and looks so good. Oh yeah. That is amazing. And it just goes to show you don't need ricotta cheese in your lasagna to have a good lasagna. This is just perfect. I also have a little extra Parmesan cheese that I shredded. Put a little of that on top. Goodness, this is just so delicious. With that said, I'm eating the rest in private. I want to thank you all for tuning in to this food experience of lasagna in the Kalorik Maxx air fryer oven. I highly recommend trying this. Look in the description down below. I will have the recipe for the sauce. That way you can do it yourselves. The recipe for the lasagna itself, you just follow along with what I did. The cooking instructions for the lasagna noodles are on the box of the oven-ready lasagna. So, that being said, I'm going to close this out. If you're new to my channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button before you leave. I got all kinds of good things coming up. And until next time, have a stellar day. Be excellent. And most of all, remember me. I'm KJ Andio, your food experience host with the most. Take care, and I'll see you next time.